Greetings, my name is Rachel Scott, and I'm joined by my colleagues Chad Buckley, Julie Murphy, Cassie Thayer-Stiles, and our former colleague Ann Shelley. As library budgets are cut or remain flat, librarians asked to do more with less are considering diverse data to investigate how best to invest their limited funds. The data available to librarians are extensive, but they may also be contradictory. In this session, we contextualize findings from interviews conducted with Illinois State University faculty with institutional and collections data. Using the words of faculty members across disciplines, we highlight some of the tensions around discovery and access to scholarly literature, perceptions of urgency, and engagement with open access. The interview results, triangulated with institutional usage and cost data, suggest a variety of ways by which to support serials access and align our practices with the strategic plan of our university and our library. And I'll hand it over to my colleague, Cassie.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm going to provide some context on Illinois State University's history, research output, and expenditures. Illinois State University was established as a normal school in 1857. ISU is the oldest public university in Illinois. Enrollment is around 20,000 students. As a former normal college, we are teaching-focused Carnegie R2 University. Our higher education research development ranking has been between 222 and 254 the past 5 years, with our HERD research and development expenditures between 236 and 260. External grant funding for FY22 was $20,450,000. Our research awards for FY22 totaled $29,750,000, and our expenditures were $73,650,000. Next slide. Thank you. This chart represents our publishing output since 2018. The data was pulled in September of 2023, so the number of titles is expected to eventually be higher for the end of the year. There was some drop in 2021 and 2022, possibly due to the pandemic. We expect these numbers to continue to rise over the next few years. I am now going to turn it over to Ann, who will talk about the faculty interviews.
Thank you, Cassie. So our team wanted to learn more about Illinois State faculty experiences, practices, and needs regarding serials access. And we thought that the best approach at this point would be to have a dialogue with them as opposed to a more one-way communication that's offered by a survey. So we explored options for supporting in-depth interviews, and we decided to apply for an internal grant that's administered by the university's Office of the Associate Vice President for Research and Graduate Studies. So we applied for and were awarded funding to pursue this project for fiscal year 2023, and part of the award money was used for interview incentives. So after developing a survey instrument and receiving IRB approval, we contacted all ISU faculty through a sanctioned email blast. The study received a lot of interest. We heard from over 50 faculty who wanted to participate. And since we sought a balance across disciplines and we wanted to speak with scholars who were at different points in their careers, we selected participants to invite who represented diversity in these ways. The interviews all took place over Zoom, and they ranged from 45 minutes to around an hour and a half, with typical interviews lasting around an hour each. There were 2 team members from those of us talking today who conducted the interviews, and we took notes, which Rachel later consolidated, and after referencing the transcripts and the recordings from the interviews, she synthesized the data from all 25 interviews into meaningful findings. As we mentioned previously, participating faculty represented a broad range of disciplines, including special education, finance, information technology, chemistry, economics, history, physics, nursing, and music, just to name a few. And the list on the slide shows departments for all faculty who were interviewed, as well as the colleges that they're under. And here is a representation of the years in which participants earned their terminal degrees. And you can see that about half of participants began their academic careers in 2017 or later. So they were either assistant professors or recently tenured by and large at the time of the interview. And now Rachel is going to explore what we learned in the interviews in more detail.
Thank you, Anne. So we categorized participants' discovery methods as independent or social. Independent activities included searching, browsing, receiving notifications, reading headlines, mining citations, and serving as a peer reviewer. Social activities include society involvement, conference attendance, social media, and collaborative research. Searching is both an exploratory form of discovery and a systematic process conducted with the goal of replicability. Similar to previous studies, participants acknowledged the use of Google and Google Scholar for discovery. A nursing professor uses Google as an initial starting point when unfamiliar with an area to get a, quote, 10,000-foot overview of what's going on out there, end quote. Both Google and Google Scholar seem to be prized for their convenience. Browsing may not be the norm, but it is still done selectively and strategically. A sociologist browses journals when considering publication venues and keeping up with the literature published in the association's flagship journals. Quote, there are 4 top journals and they are non-negotiable. My career will be better if I publish in those journals, end quote. Although notifications can be a useful form of discovery, participants noted concerns around getting from the point of notification to actually accessing the full text of the content. As one psychology scholar said, quote, journal websites are designed to make money, so they don't always get you to the library, end quote. A physics scholar indicated that headlines will sometimes alert them to the release of significant findings. Scholars in social work and geography indicated that they review Chronicle of Higher Education to keep up with significant research in their fields, but also higher education more broadly. Scholars in the humanities, arts, and social sciences detailed elaborate processes for mining citations that facilitate their discovery of scholarly literature. Sometimes these practices cross over from independent to social when, for example, a reading list discussed on social media leads to continued reading and branching back to discover relevant sources. Social elements of discovery were emphasized by all participants, whether it took the form of conference attendance, participation in disciplinary societies or organizations, or research collaborations. A health sciences scholar emphasized the importance of networking at conferences and identifying people conducting research in one's own area or finding collaborators across the country. Participants across disciplines noted that articles and new publications are shared among scholars with related research agendas. Quote, things will circulate through informal channels, Slacks, emails, end quote. An applied sciences scholar mentioned that word of mouth remains a powerful tool for discovery, with colleagues recommending scholars and publications. Participants across disciplines access scholarly literature through the library when their workflows are dependent on disciplinary databases to which the library provides access. A few participants qualified this to indicate that they are only interested in full text databases. Even with link resolvers in place, indexes are of little interest to some. Browsing was highlighted as one of the better ways to connect discovery and access in library platforms. Scholars in business psychology, communication, and information technology use Google Scholar as a frequent or exclusive starting point, saying that access through the library requires login and is, quote, more complicated. Sometimes it just takes me to the journal and I have to find the article and I usually give up, end quote. Some of the participants said that as tech-savvy and productive scholar, they shouldn't struggle with the library search platforms, but they always do. This person discourages their students from using library platforms for research. Conversely, a chemistry scholar said that he explicitly teaches library platforms to graduate students because they come in using search engines almost exclusively. Quote, in one of my courses, we do a library database exercise. They go through SciFinder, chemical structure database, talk about DOIs, and create ORCIDs, end quote. A participant in communication sciences and disorders also values Google because it allows them to see what their clinicians and patients see, saying that they sometimes use Google as a touchstone of, quote, how realistic is what I'm finding and what I'm able to access versus what they're able to access, end quote. When content isn't immediately available, primary strategies include requesting items via interlibrary loan or document delivery, asking a colleague at another institution, requesting it from the author, asking on social media, or looking for it online. Each of these possibilities is informed by personal preferences and disciplinary practices. Scholars in business management, chemistry, communication sciences and disorders, finance, geography, human development and family studies, literary studies, musicology, nursing, psychology, social work, and special education express satisfaction with interlibrary loan and document delivery. However, as noted in the quotation in the middle of the screen, interlibrary loan and document delivery are not always built into the workflows of scholars. But we were surprised at the number of participants who were happy to make a request and wait for the document to be delivered. A host of considerations were discussed on the topic of sharing and requesting scholarly literature. Most participants happily receive requests and share materials, noting their pleasure at someone expressing interest in their research. However, a sociologist relayed an anecdote about an established scholar pushing back against an email request to share a publication. A communication scholar shared the quotation on the right about face management among collaborators. And an anthropology scholar suggested that requesting an article from an author both disclosed a lack of resources at one's own institution and suggested a lack of availability or prominence of the journal in which the article was published. No one admitted to using Sci-Hub, but other mechanisms of sharing content were alluded to, as noted in the quotation on the left. Requesting that the library purchase something also came up in interviews. However, a literature scholar expressed concerns about making requests for their own scholarship, saying, quote, "I censor myself in some ways because I'm afraid that if I ask for too much, I'd rather privilege what I know I need for class than what I need and find an alternate route for what I would like to work on, because then it's just me fending for myself to find it and not 15 students having to deal with finding the resource themselves." The immediate availability of content was not as universally needed as we had suspected, although most participants indicated, quote, "the faster I can get resources, the better," end quote. The relative time they would be willing to wait varied from an hour to a month or longer for an essential resource. The most common explanation for needing materials immediately is that, quote, "research time is precious. When time is allocated for research, faculty need their resources at hand." The most frequently articulated considerations were schedule, application, timing, importance to project, and format. Several participants suggested that expectations for immediate gratification and immediate access in other areas of their life influence their needs for scholarly literature. Quote, "there's a pervasive mentality of wanting something right now," end quote. A math scholar emphasized being in the moment by saying, "oh God, it's like I want it yesterday because I need to check something from several sources at the same time, and I only have so much time for research, which means several hours all at the same time. It's like art. I have to put it down or it goes away. I can't do some of it now and check something later. 2 days later, I will have forgotten what I'm thinking about. I need to see several articles at the same time, look at them and see which is more relevant," end quote. Nonetheless, a surprisingly large number of scholars pushed back against the expectation of immediacy with statements such as, quote, "I can't read everything all at once anyway, so if I have to wait a few weeks to get something, it's not the end of the world," end quote. A social scientist prepares for conference papers by requesting materials months in advance. A humanities scholar said, quote, "it's lovely to have immediate access, but my research doesn't hinge on a single source. There's always something else I can work on while I'm waiting," end quote. A psychology scholar provided some levity by saying, quote, "it's not like if I don't get this research paper paragraph written by the end of the day, people die. It's not that important, you know? I think generally a couple of days is fine," end quote. We even heard from a few folks who dismissed the necessity of any particular article, as in the final quotation on the slide. We asked participants to place themselves on an open access spectrum from actively embracing it to completely opposed to it. All participants fell somewhere between active and antagonistic. No one claimed either of these extremes. And for many, their relationship with openness is complicated. Although several expressed strong convictions that knowledge should be freely available, especially scholarship produced by faculty at a public institution, just as many expressed equally strong concerns about existing open access publishing models, venues, and processes. Conflict between open access and principle and practice surfaced as the most prominent theme, followed by equity. Most participants have limited, if any, grant funding. Only 19 million of the university's total 29.75 million is from external agencies. The lack of federally funded research likely plays into faculty members' decisions around open access publishing. With no requirements to make their work publicly available, and from federal level or from university, many simply opt out. Participants across disciplines raise concerns about equity and quality related to open access. Quote, open access or APCs are discriminatory. Only faculty at big schools have the funding. Grants are unbelievably hard to get, especially for newer faculty, end quote. Many also noted concerns around the quality of open access venues or the perceived lack of prestige relative to other venues in their field. With that, I'll hand it over to Chad to provide some context for library collections at Illinois State University.
Thank you, Rachel. To give some context about how we've been trying to meet the needs of these scholars, I'll now discuss the situation at our library in more detail. Milner Libraries had an overall flat materials budget for the past 10 years with a couple of very small decreases and increases, putting us at just under $4 million currently. There have been no significant increases in state appropriations for ISU during this period, and enrollment has remained fairly steady with some small increases the past 2 years. Our electronic resources budget line includes both e-journal and database subscriptions, and it makes up about 75% of the overall materials budget in FY15. If there had been no cancellations or changes to e-resources during that decade, the overall e-resources budget, assuming a 6% annual inflationary increase, would have resulted in a budget deficit of over $1 million by the present day. This situation with our flat budget has forced our library to conduct regular, almost annual reviews of serial and database subscriptions. Milner Library's overall strategy for dealing with this has been to cancel high cost per use journals, both online and print, and when available, activate those journals in the Copyright Clearance Center's Get It Now document delivery service for article delivery within minutes in most cases. This is unmediated in our implementation, and our users discover these Get It Now titles via the library's link resolver or via Third Iron's browsing service. Average cost per article range from $30 to $42, although there are some that are higher than that. In FY15, when we began the service, we initially canceled 48 journal titles and activated those in Get It Now. The following year, we canceled 112 additional journal titles and activated those. We've been canceling journals all along since then. After an initial large bump in expenditures due to increased attention on the new program, Get It Now usage dropped, but it has generally been increasing since then. Ongoing subscriptions to canceled journals in this program would have totaled well over $500,000 per year, compared to the $50,000 or less we've been spending annually for Get It Now. Faculty have generally been very pleased with the speed of delivery and the quality of the articles received. In FY23, we began deactivating some Get It Now titles from specific publishers where coverage overlapped with new read and publish and all access agreements. Get It Now costs are expected to further drop as we implement more transformative agreements in the coming years. Milner Library also utilizes standard interlibrary loan services to meet the needs of scholars, as mentioned before, with an average turnaround time of 27 hours to fulfill requests. ILL usage dropped overall during the pandemic and has slowly been recovering. Some departments have shown steady or increasing ILL usage during this period. These include accounting, agriculture, art, criminal justice, kinesiology and recreation, management and quantitative methods in business, and nursing. Departments showing major declines in ILL usage included communication, English, languages, literatures and cultures, marketing, music, politics and government, and theater and dance. There were no readily apparent reasons why some departments' ILL usage increased while others decreased. I'll now turn it over to Julie.
Thank you, Chad. For many years at Milner, we've participated in a handful of big deals, including ACM Digital Library, American Chemical Society, IEEE Explorer, and Project Muse's Premium Collection. In 2021, we entered into our first read and publish agreement with a major university press. And in January 2023, we also began a commercial press access only agreement and a commercial press transformative agreement. I'll be talking more about those most recent agreements today. We've decided to anonymize these vendors since we will be discussing our usage data. For the next few slides, I'll be sharing usage and cost per use data derived from TRJ3 counter reports. In all cases, we used total item requests as our measure of usage and removed the usage data for OA Gold articles so that these graphs would reflect only the change in usage and cost per use for items that we would always have to pay for. In all cases, I've used red to indicate the data occurring after those agreements took effect. As you can see on this slide, our University Press transformative agreement that began in 2021 resulted in approximately a 250% jump in usage from 2020 to 2021, and our cost per use was more than cut in half from that previous year. This data also does not include the value of OA publishing, which this publisher included at no additional cost. For our two newest agreements, we only have partial data from 2023 to discuss so far. However, for the commercial press access only agreement, usage from January through September 2023 has already exceeded usage in the 4 previous years. Our cost per use is based on the prorated cost that we would have paid from January through September, and as you can see, it's far lower than our recent cost per use for this vendor. Because we don't have multiple years worth of data post-agreement to examine for our new commercial press agreements, but we have already completed the spring semester of 2023, we wanted to do an apples-to-apples comparison of this spring semester to the last several. We found that after the initial month, the total item requests almost doubled the average usage in the same months from 2019 through 2022. Our other new commercial agreement in 2023, the Commercial Press Transformative Agreement, has not been demonstrating the results that we hoped for so far. Our total item requests through September 2023 are on track to potentially exceed 2022's numbers, with a projected total somewhere between 19 and 20,000 total item requests. But the cost per use does not seem to have fallen based on usage through September and the prorated cost of the agreement. These numbers are based on the subscription fees we paid and do not include the agreed upon publishing fee. Doing another spring semester comparison for the Commercial Press Transformative Agreement, it's apparent again that this data is not meeting our expectations. While the March, April, and May usage are increased over the previous year, on average, we aren't seeing any significant increase. It's early days right now, but we will take another look at the data at the end of the year, and we will need to consider whether continuing this agreement is in our best interest. Now I'll hand things over to Rachel to discuss how we move forward from here.
Thank you, Julie. The interviews we conducted highlight some of the ways in which library services fall short in providing seamless and comprehensive access to scholarly literature. It was helpful to hear from faculty about their perceptions of doing research at an R2 with some limited resources and increasing impact and increasing pressure to have impact. The variety of needs and expectations did not suggest a single or straightforward path forward, excuse me. Key takeaways from the interviews include many faculty are willing to wait for resources, but for those faculty who are not willing to wait, requesting something, whether via interlibrary loan or document delivery, is an obstacle. Also, concerns about the perceived quality and equity of open access, not to mention its complexity, continues to impede its adoption. Our work to support faculty will involve several different approaches. Our initial steps into access-only and open access agreements have had some mixed results, with some of the agreements showing a solid return on investment and one that's not yet meeting expectations. All open access agreements are not created equal, and it's important to critically assess the agreements from a variety of perspectives. Cost per use is important, but what about alignment with institutional mission and purpose? Milner Library recently revised its strategic plan, which includes more explicit support for faculty research. We want Milner Library to take a central role in faculty success, in their success as scholars and teachers. One of the most common requests Milner receives is to provide access to all journals from a few specific publishers. Our flat budget, however, has meant ongoing cuts from our a la carte subscriptions. Pursuing an access-only agreement has met faculty requests for expanded access and also driven down the cost per use in early analysis. Milner entered into its first open access agreement in 2021 and continues to add agreements when they are at or near cost neutral. Our relatively low publishing output allows for this, especially when working with science publishers. We appreciate that other institutions' considerations are very different from our own, but facilitating the open access publishing of faculty scholarship aligns with library and university strategic plans, has generated a huge amount of goodwill with teaching faculty, and has strengthened partnerships with the Office of Research. We are currently in the midst of a green open access initiative that seeks to add open access articles written by university faculty into the institutional repository. We hope that taking a proactive and assertive approach will not only make the IR more representative of the university scholarship, but also reiterate that green open access is in fact a viable form of open access. Early efforts have led to faculty members who had not previously deposited in the IR depositing eligible versions of their work. The interviews we conducted are not the end of our work to hear from faculty about their needs. There are many benefits to a decentralized subject librarian-driven approach, but it doesn't necessarily support strategic, data-driven, or comprehensive approaches to collections. We'll continue to receive input through multiple channels and plan to conduct another round of focus groups or interviews in the coming year. I wanted to close by showing publication venues featuring articles that have benefited from one of Milner's open access agreements in the past 12 months. The only college that has not yet benefited is the College of Business. Milner Library is pleased to provide material support to ISU authors in disciplines such as art education, theater, politics and government, and social work, among other fields. These are faculty who don't often have grant funding and may not be able to publish their work open access otherwise. Several authors have expressed their gratitude to Milner for the open access publishing support, and it's only fitting to conclude our talk today by amplifying the voice of one such colleague who wrote, quote, "I am grateful and honored to have received this funding. From my experiences, as well as that of my colleagues, I know that articles that have open access are read far more often and are far more influential. I particularly value this funding for this particular article because it is the culmination of years of work, and it provides evidence for an argument that I hope will shift academic debates in two unconnected areas, innovation studies and Islamic studies. Thank you once again for funding this article as open access." Many thanks for your attention and interest. We welcome your questions in the live Q&A. We've written up our findings and encourage you to check these out for more detailed analysis of the interviews.